At the time of Maria Cornell's death, the United States was undergoing something of a religious revolution. The 1820s and 1830s marked the height of a period of spiritual revivalism known as the Second Great Awakening. During this period, weekly church attendance among the American population rose dramatically, and the number of clergy members preaching and ministering in the country increased by 20 times what it had been at the end of the 18th century. New Christian denominations and religious movements, especially Methodism, began to crop up around the eastern seaboard states and to attract throngs of new followers who, like Maria Cornell, reveled in the opportunities they provided for spiritual growth and the discovery of community and fellowship. Many of the new Christian denominations that arose during the Second Great Awakening broke from older Calvinist religious traditions. Orthodox Calvinist faith of the type that had been dominant in New England since the 17th century was a rather austere and solemn religious tradition. Puritanical Calvinism emphasized that human beings were born with an innate moral depravity as a result of original sin. Only those individuals to whom God chose to extend His grace could hope to be saved from eternal damnation. Furthermore, people could not do anything to secure their own salvation or grace. God extended it only to a certain subset of people, called the elect. Though believers could do nothing to earn their way into the circle of the elect, they were expected to conform to relatively strict codes of conduct, including eschewing worldly pleasures in favor of a focus on spiritual devotion. This was the kind of faith tradition that Maria Cornell was raised in. Though Cornell would remark to her family that she found this brand of Christianity gloomy, it had been suited to a colonial world where life was hard, short on luxuries, and often precarious. By the 19th century, however, the nature of life in the young United States was already beginning to change in ways that opened the door for new ways of thinking about religion and about life in general. New transportation infrastructures that cut paths through the wilderness and drew on the power of steam collapsed the distance between various parts of the country and opened new areas to expansion and settlement. The rise of industry gave young women like Maria Cornell the opportunity to earn a living and made people more able to afford the material comforts of life. The rise of democratic politics engaged larger segments of the population in choosing how and by whom they would be represented. These changes left many Americans feeling optimistic about their ability to improve their worldly existences and empowered to shape the course of their own lives, including their spiritual lives. Increasingly, Americans embraced new religious movements that shared their optimistic outlooks, movements that emphasized the human ability for moral improvement. Unlike Orthodox Calvinism, with its concept of a limited elect, new religious traditions emphasized that all souls were spiritually equal. Anyone could attain salvation and enjoy a fulfilling personal relationship with God if they chose to embrace faith. The Methodist faith that attracted Maria Cornell was by far the fastest growing of these new religious traditions. At the end of the 18th century, only about 1,000 Americans had been members of Methodist congregations. By the 1850s, however, Methodists would make up 34% of American churchgoers. Methodist success in recruiting new believers was partially the result of their tenacity. Methodists were willing to send out ministers like Ephraim Avery to traverse even the remotest parts of the country, preaching in a circuit to small communities that could not sustain a church of their own. But much of the appeal of Methodism was its emphasis on heavily emotive religion. Early Methodists emphasized the need for believers to feel a deep emotional connection to God and to their faith in order to achieve conversion and salvation. Methodist preachers were not required to have formal education or theological training as their Orthodox Calvinist predecessors had been. Instead, they were valued for their ability to inspire and regale audiences with their charismatic speaking styles and emotional appeals to faith. Methodist worship reflected this commitment to conversion through stoking of spiritual passions. Whereas Orthodox Calvinists held religious services that were often restrained and formal, Methodist services included passionate sermons, singing, and forms of worship that invited church attendees to participate in services by writhing, calling out, and even speaking in tongues. Some of the most popular Methodist preaching events were camp meetings, much like the one where Reverend Avery allegedly engaged in sex with Maria Cornell. These highly emotional, festive events involved hundreds or even thousands of people gathering in open-air camps in remote locations and engaging in preaching and prayer from sunup to sundown. Camp meetings were wildly popular social and religious events, marked by powerful conversion experiences and feelings of fellowship. It was this sense of spiritual belonging and passionate engagement with God that had drawn Maria Cornell to the Methodist faith. Not long after her conversion from Orthodox Calvinism to Methodism, Cornell wrote home to her family to sing the praises of her new religious tradition.
I have been made to rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. I feel that I have an evidence within my own soul that God has forgiven me, and I have an unshaken trust in God that I would not part with for 10,000 worlds.
While Methodism found its share of eager converts in many rural and newly industrialized parts of the United States, its meteoric rise as a religious sect was not without controversy. To those Americans used to older, more conservative, and more staid religious traditions, Methodism seemed like an unwelcome addition to the religious landscape. Methodist ministers were at times critiqued as ignorant rustics and charlatans who traversed the countryside breaking up existing religious communities and luring people away from their existing flocks. Their bold style of preaching alienated those used to more conventional church services. To some, Methodist ministers seemed like dangerous outsiders whose ministry inspired potentially risky passions. Rumors at times circulated that camp meetings were spaces of sexual immorality, where more souls were created than saved. How did this landscape of religious change and tumult that acted as the backdrop for the Tiverton Tragedy shape public reactions to Avery's case?